Hello and welcome to Grow Conversations, your window into the world of medical cannabis. My name's Alex Fraser and I'll be your host on this episode. And our guest on this episode is Kayla Mann. Kayla is the Chief Financial Officer for Habitat, who are a cultivator of medical cannabis based in, where are you in Canada exactly, Kayla? Remind me.
We're in the interior British Columbia.
There we go. I'd have got that wrong because my Canadian geography is appalling. But thank you so much for joining us. Thank you for being here, Kayla. To start us off, maybe you can tell us just a little bit about yourself, your sort of career path and how you ended up working in medical cannabis and for Habitat.
Yeah, so my career in medical cannabis started in the medical program here in Canada. So I've been in cannabis for about 9 years now. So it really started in kind of the middle of my life where I just saw cannabis being something that needed to be fostered in a way that maybe it wasn't in our community, in my local community, I should say. BC has a huge presence in that medical cannabis world and really has been an advocate for it well before it ever legalized here. So my journey started then. Then we decided to take our medical cannabis into the federal program for recreational purposes as well here in Canada in 2018. From there, I worked with my company that I'm with now, Cake and Caviar, or Habitat is kind of the overarching brand that we are. And then I actually took some time and moved into one of the big public cannabis companies for a couple of years to really understand what things were going to look like at that level, get a deep understanding, and then, of course, brought that knowledge back to my beautifully small team back in BC here. And the rest is history.
Amazing. You mentioned your small team, and we were talking just a bit before we got filming, weren't we? That I was asking sort of what do you do day in, day out, and because Chief Financial Officer doesn't tell us a huge amount, unfortunately. But so could you explain what sort of a day in the life of Kayla Mann looks like, or the sort of things that you get involved in with the company?
Well, I think people would laugh pretty hard at what a day in the life of Kayla Mann, Chief Financial Officer, is at Habitat, because someday I'm feeding fish. We'll talk about that later. Sometimes I'm harvesting a room. A lot of the time I'm selling our cannabis, creating connections worldwide. So I handle all sales, marketing, the branding that you see with the Cake and Caviar brand really is me and a beautiful team called Better Good Agency here. But handling all that side of things. And then, of course, all the financial side of it. We are a small team, but we do have some investors. So investor relations. It really can be anything in a day.
Amazing. Yeah, so you've mentioned small team, you've mentioned feeding fish, so I think we're leading somewhere with this. Let's talk a bit about what makes Habitat different and Cake and Caviar different to your typical medical cannabis cultivator producer.
Yeah, so first off, we're a micro. So what that means in the Canadian cannabis landscape is that we are kind of capped at 2,000 square feet of grow space. So, when we say small batch, when we say BC bud, it really is like that craft BC bud. So with that, our team is only about 10 people. 5 of those are full time. So the rest kind of trimmers and technicians that we have part time. So there's a lot of love that's poured into this company and our operations and of course, as a small team, we decided to take on a rather intricate way of growing. So we grow using aquaponics, that system is something that's been around for a long time in kind of the fish farming world, on the aquaculture side, which is just the fish production side. And then, of course, to marry that to plants is a beautiful thing because we create a symbiotic ecosystem and basically harness the power of nature to grow 2 species within the same system. And this one is indoors. Really quickly, we hope to build that into a food supply system, that can work for people it does work for people in the area now, but to grow that to be a bigger scale and even include greenhouse products as well on the plant feeding side. But so for now, our system grows organic coho salmon. And with that, the waste from the salmon, we create into a nutrient profile and a nutrient dense water solution that then gets transferred to the plants. So it's a decoupled system, which de-risks both sides of the operation. But we harness the power of that poop, and then we take it and utilize it to grow our plants. There's a few nutrients and stuff that do get added to that, and it kind of can ebbs and flows with that. It's a very intricate system to work with, but we really believe that it's worth the outcome.
So it's not actually that you've got cannabis plants with salmon swimming amongst the roots. That's not, no, sadly not. No,
No,
that would be quite an image though. That would be an incredible thing for your marketing,
right?
I'm sure. So they are separated in that sense, but reliant on each other. Can you? I mean,
Yeah.
you have to some extent the power of the poop, but can you explain a little bit more about how that works and how that symbiotic relationship works?
Yeah, definitely. So yeah, to your point, the plants aren't sitting on top of the fish, which I think is the beautiful image everyone does love. And it really is in a way. Unfortunately, cannabis, she's a little bit more fickle than that. So she needs, some different stages for her growth. And so we can harness that once the water gets collected in what we call our mineralization step. So, you have the fish growing, they poop, that gets collected and shooted out into what's called a solids digester. I'm Italian, so you're going to see my hands quite a bit here, but it'll get collected into a solids digester. From that solids digester, we'll ration out aspects of it that goes into this big aerobic digester. And what this digester does is it breaks things down from ammonia down into those nutrients that we want to see for the plants. From that, we start doing some testing. We start to build that solution out, adding water back. And then from there, we'll do kind of last minute additions of certain minerals or nutrients that need to be added to it. And then that water will then be flowed directly to the plants, and they will live in that water until being harvested.
Amazing. So you're essentially getting free nutrients, free fertilizer for your plants, and
Yeah.
then the salmon are gaining out of the conversation too, or I suppose the water itself is you're cleaning it for the sake of feeding the plants, so they're getting
Yeah,
a clean environment out of this as well.
100%. So with the aquaculture side of things, we actually recycle 99.7% of the water that gets pumped for the fish back to the fish. So from that, we take it through a water treatment process right on site, and take it through an ammonia treatment and then an ozone treatment, and then that water goes right back to the fish. So it's a really sustainable system that is quite self fulfilling in that way. So we're quite proud of what we've built.
That's amazing. What was the sort of spark that meant you went down this particular route? Because it's the first I've heard, particularly in the medical sphere, of anyone doing this sort of. I mean, I've heard of it on very small scale,
Mm-hmm.
in maybe in parts of the US and Canada, but not in terms of this production. Is there any sort of, other than obviously the benefit of having two products at the end of the day? You've got some lovely salmon and some lovely cannabis, I presume, and obviously there's a benefit to having to be able to sell two things instead of the one. But is there anything more to it in terms of what inspired that? Is it? Yeah, I suppose what I'm
Definitely.
leaning towards is, is there a benefit in terms of the produce being better, particularly on either side, having done this system?
I think anything is done better if it's done intentionally, and can limit for example, inputs, and have those right on site. Limit the water use. As we know, growing cannabis is quite resource intensive, and buying nitrogen and things like that is just something that, especially here in Canada, we're just keep seeing increases on fees and costs, especially when it's being imported. So for us to be able to develop those nutrients right on site is a huge benefit, and ultimately just builds a more sustainable ecosystem that we can have more control over, right, with these outputs or inputs. But the story of Habitat is one of a labor of love. I mean, it's situated on 600 acres in the beautiful Shuswap, BC, which is an amazing area of just lakes and mountains. I'm looking at it right now, and beautiful farming land. So when we started this company, the land was inherited by a fifth generation farmer, which is an old friend of my business partner who I'm running the business with now. He's since moved on, but it was his family's land, and from there we all got involved to help build this land into something that could be prosperous for them. And that started with a bison ranch. So we actually had a buffalo ranch
Oh, wow.
that we ran, which was a holistic crop rotating, or sorry, pasture rotating, grass fed bison program. So the regenerative agriculture has always been kind of at the heart of what we do. And of course, we were growing medical cannabis as well. So when you're growing medical cannabis and you're growing it in the more, I guess, traditional way, you're not that conscientious of how that's affecting the environment. And so we had these two businesses where one just really, didn't tie with the other as far as values go. So we thought, what the heck can we do to make this growing process align better with our values? So, we're at farmers markets touting the benefits of bison and the nutrient density of it and how they're free roaming and et cetera, et cetera. How can we kind of build that profile for our cannabis as well? So that's when we started to play around with the aquaponics idea and technology on a very small scale with our old soil grow and cocoa grow. But from there, we just kind of, it just started to bloom, in a way that we realized that the plants could really love this. So then we went ahead and, my business partner raised a bunch of money, and, the whole legalization of cannabis happened, and we were kind of off to the races. And we've remained small just based on everything that's kind of happened, but it's something that we do see a huge future in as far as kind of farming in general. So that's really where it started.
Amazing. So, so it wasn't that you had a farm and you were producing salmon and you sort of plonked some cannabis on top of that. It was very much the cannabis was there, and the intention to produce that was always there. It was a matter of how can I do this sustainably? How can we do this in a way that's going to be sustainable and something that you can speak to as well, I suppose, in terms of your investments and everything else that you're doing. This it's a USP, isn't it? I suppose, but it's more about sustainability. And I am really intrigued to hear. So forgive my ignorance. So how long have you been selling medical cannabis in Canada for? And are you in any other markets yet? I know we're obviously going to be talking about the UK, but I wondered if there's anywhere else that you've reached so far.
Yeah, so Habitat has had a license since 2019. We were actually the first micro cultivation license that was issued in Canada. So with legalization, and then of course, before we built this company, had an MMAR license as well on site in the medical cannabis world before legalization. But since then, the majority of our product goes to Germany. And we've been in the medical and rec markets of Canada, obviously, since 2019. We've, sent some product down to Australia as well. Ultimately, we just want to be in markets that appreciate, well-crafted and intentional cannabis. And for us, those values really align with the European market. So, and last but not least, our most recent will be the UK.
Absolutely. Yeah, very excited to have Cake and Caviar products coming to the UK very, very shortly. I don't know exactly what date this podcast is going to come out with, so I guess it'll be similar. It'll be around the time this comes out that your products should be landing here in the UK. So very exciting. What is the response in terms of the experience? Do you I want to move on from the salmon thing because whilst it's fascinating, there's so much more we can talk about. But
Right.
I have to ask: do the consumers of your product notice? Is there anything different that you hear from them in terms of their experience compared to other brands on the market, for example? I mean, that you would attribute to the fact that you're doing this. What's the word for it? Sorry, symbiosis. Yes.
Yeah. We have a lot of great growers in Canada, so I wouldn't say that our quality tops any of those great growers. I think it really comes down to the process of growing at the end of the day. The inputs certainly, I think, do boast quality in both the terps and the THC. We have felt that has been a huge contributor to our success on the higher potency stuff and the beautiful terps that bloom from these plants. But I think really what people appreciate about the process, if people know about growing cannabis, is more of that sustainability aspect and the clean aspect as well, right? Coming from an illegal market, this whole transition into the regulated framework poses a lot of differences as far as the quality in general. So then to take it that one step further, utilizing all natural inputs and things like that, I think makes a big difference for people. So I think people are mostly conscientious about that when they're buying our products. And then some people, just want fireweed, and that's good too.
That's absolutely fine. And you're, I mean, you're in the rec market in Canada, so that's obviously not a problem. Whereas here in the UK,
Yeah,
we
yeah,
might get in trouble for suggesting such things. But
right,
certainly, I don't disagree with you at all. Um, and I think actually, I think medical patients too also want high quality cannabis. I think people who are who feel they have to, and so as a patient myself, one of the things I tell people often is that sometimes I get sick of consuming cannabis. Like it's not a hobby for me. Sometimes it's a chore because it's part of my
of
daily routine.
course,
And if you can make that pleasurable and enjoyable, you don't want to be using low quality produce if it's something that you're going to do day in day out as a necessity. That just doesn't make a lot of sense to me. It's akin to I also have a dietary illness, sorry, a bowel disease, and that is a dietary illness, and I have to make sure I'm eating the right food for the same reason. If I eat poor quality food or the wrong food, then it impacts me. Whereas I need to eat, of course, I need to eat. I need to take my medicine, but if I do it and have a certain quality, then I feel better for it as well. So I could go on forever about the sort of blurring of lines between medical and rec. We're obviously talking about different
right,
markets and different legislations, and there it's a bit more clearly defined.
yeah,
But yes, good quality cannabis is very much a demand, I suppose, from the patient population here in the UK. And
yeah,
I think that's a big part of the reason why we as Grow have been going around the world and trying to find, the very top cultivators who are doing this, like you said, intentionally. And I think that's key. Um, Maybe we can dig into that a bit more because you've used that word a couple of times. What do you mean when we talk about intentionally? Obviously, you've talked about the practical side of that, but um,
well, I mean, I'll probably I'll probably get in crap for saying it just because if I bring my, witchy side into this, it's not proper business, but I believe and plants, nature itself, if you're intentional with it, you get the most benefit out of it. If you're out breathing the air, you get the most benefits from what that air gets breathed, as you breathe that air in, and how that affects you. So I don't see it any differently for plants. So to your point about medical cannabis and how this affects you, and the optimal medicine that you can achieve, medicinal benefits that you can achieve from consuming this product for an intentional purpose, it should come from an intentional person. Like, why wouldn't you want to kind of double up those layers of care and health? And for us, we take it very seriously that we are growing a plant that is a Schedule 1 drug in many places, is illegal in many places, and we don't take that for granted. So when it comes to the quality of things and how it's grown, that's important to us. Our team is very tight knit and close, and has those same values as they grow the cannabis, because I want to know that those girls are taken care of every day. I want to know that when they're harvested, they've had that care throughout, and it's consistent, and beyond just the regulatory burdens and things like that we carry, especially in Canada as cultivators. That if you can bring in that sense of intentionality to it, I think all that does is better the patient at the other end. And then another aspect of it, that shoots from our passion of this whole thing and being in the program, before legalization, is that we were able to grandfather all of our genetics from those medical programs that we used to
oh wow,
participate in. So everything comes from, the Cake and Caviar genetic locker, and that Cake and Caviar name's actually, years and years before, we were able to build this company. So putting that into it as well, and being able to pheno hunt, strains that we've had in market and have had those successes, we think is a huge benefit to us and the patients as well.
yeah. I mean, it's another. I was talking about blurring the line between medical and rec in terms of the desires of patients or the desires of consumers, but also as you rightly point out, in the development of the genetics has had to happen, because of prohibition on a pretty much global scale, and Canada
Mm-hmm.
being one of the first to move away from that. But that the genetics that we're using in medical have naturally come from those that have been bred through prohibition, through this sort of dark tunnel. That thankfully Canada leading the way, and other places we're outside the other. We've seen the light, and we're out the other end of the tunnel to round off that metaphor. But Yeah, so I mean, it just makes that point. It's fantastic that you've been able to hold on to that, I suppose,
Mhm.
and utilize that. Yeah, I mean, what does that look like? Can you give us an idea in terms of numbers, in terms of the type of genetics? Is there anything that stands out in there? I'm counting
Yeah.
my way off this, but
I mean, we've got about 180 to 200 different genetics in the locker. And unfortunately, with a very small space, we're tight in how much pheno hunting that we can do. A lot of them were bred in house and crossed in house. British Columbia has a long, long history of amazing growers and little pocketed areas of growers in the province. But really, for us, it just came to sticking to our guns. Like, we didn't want to be, you know, the company that needed to put out the new Coca-Cola cherry and and you have to keep ideating to keep the masses
Hmm,
happy. We really wanted to become a household name for people where they knew they could get a consistent, reputable product that was grown with intention every time.
amazing, amazing. That's fantastic. Um, can we talk a little bit about the team around you? Because I think one of the questions I get asked all the time is, how do I get a job in medical cannabis? What sort of people are growers, cultivators, companies in this space looking to hire? And if I'm talking to, I won't name one of the larger companies, trying to get them to break down their team is complicated and difficult, and there's all sorts of people in there. But for you, it's going to be relatively straightforward. I hope. I don't mean to
Yeah.
make it's difficult
Yep.
for you, but you have to understand the sort of skill sets that you have around you that's helping deliver what you're talking about.
Yeah. I think first off, multifaceted is one of the most sought after things you could have in a company. As a financial officer, one of, I think, our largest feats was becoming profitable. And I don't mean profitable like we're bringing in the cash. I mean, we're sturdy, we're steady, and that is an extremely difficult thing to achieve in Canada. So something I foresee in the future of cannabis, especially as things open up for cultivation, et cetera, around the world, is that the more multifaceted you can be, the more beneficial you are to a team.
Mm,
um, our small team is really consisted of my CEO, Rudy Schiebel, who's the jack of all trades. He's the innovator, he's the visionary, he's the one that is the thorn in my side pretty much every day in the best way. But he's the one that propels this company forward, and he's the one that has the backbone of, the strongest person I know to actually make it through kind of how things went in Canada.
mm,
And then we have Nikki Tisnati, who is crucial, if not the person that really helped put this together, along with our engineer, Aquaponics engineer. So she would be an operations manager or COO, if you will. We don't really do titles in my company, but she really understands the system as a whole. So for our system, obviously very unique, you need to know a lot about plumbing, a lot about pumps, a lot about water chemistry, and a lot about plants, and a lot about fish. So that's a bit crazy, but ultimately having plant technicians and system specialists that can understand whether it's the technology that they're using to automate things, the process of cannabis itself, and ultimately just a really like intentional care to the plants, I think is huge. I think people will respect that because you bring that intention to the team. So that's that. And then, of course, our quality assurance person wouldn't be able to get anything out the door without quality assurance, which ultimately, in that role, I think it's extremely crucial to understand operations efficiencies, meet needs of sales, as well as meeting regulatory standards.
mm,
People can come in from pharmaceutical industries. They can come in from, all of these different backgrounds with a quality assurance background, food, beverage, whatever. You got to be able to apply it to cannabis and work with your team to get that shit out the door in the best and easiest way possible.
mm,
Because if you don't, you're costing time, you're costing money, and that's something that we're already extremely short on every time. Cash flow is probably one of the hugest factors of being a successful cannabis company. So having somebody that can learn and weather those storms. I mean, we've had so many close calls of shutting our doors, and I mean, every single person I think in cannabis has had those feelings in Canada. So having a super strong financial officer or controller who's able to, be tapped in not only to the financial needs of the company, but with the rhythms and flows of cannabis in the industry is a
Mm.
huge aspect to be able to be successful. So I think those are probably the most crucial roles. And then best trimmers you can find. Luckily in BC, we have weed trimmers that have been doing it for 30, 40 years. And we take good care of those people and build a family out of them, and they show up when needed, without fail. And that's why, you guys get the quality that you do, because it all comes down to exactly how it's finished, which, most importantly is how it's trimmed as well at the
Yeah.
end.
I know that'll be reassuring to the patients here. I think when the realization that something hasn't been hand trimmed is always a bit of a disappointment, because that extra bit of care makes such a difference, as you'll know.
Yeah.
It's fascinating to hear about the team. Sorry, go ahead.
Quickly on that, obviously,
Yeah,
I wanted to say the most important person, but obviously, this is one that everyone would know as a position in cannabis is the grower.
yeah,
Obviously, the grower is crucial, and we're lucky, very lucky, to have a master grower named Tara Berg, who is a local icon in my eyes, who's been growing cannabis for a very long time, and she's taken on the challenge of taking over, Nikki's role, as she's now on mat leave. But having somebody that can dive into that system and manhandle everything that's in there is quite important. And then she's got support on that side as well. So
amazing,
got to give a
amazing.
shout out.
Can't forget the head grower, the master
Grower.
grower.
But
You get
obviously
quite
people
often.
know that that's a position that is highly important, if not the most, obviously.
But I think one of the things so the conversation will go, how do I get a job in the cannabis industry? And I'm like, well, what's your background? And they'll be like, I really love cannabis, and and sometimes they'll be like, I've grown it, I know I know my way around the plant, I know how it works, I know what the nutrient mix is, I know all that stuff, and that's great. But I think the reality is typically there's one guy at every company that is doing that as sort of the brain of the grow operation, and
Totally.
then you've got a whole host of people around you who have skills from other industries and other areas that are helping support
Hmm.
the vision of the grower, the vision of the company. But it's
Yeah.
not necessary for everybody to be to have grown cannabis in their back room, or to have a particular,
No.
or even to have consumed the plant necessarily themselves.
Exactly. Yeah. I think an appreciation for it, whether you
Yeah.
consume or not, is important. I can think a lot of people in the industry can agree that, if you can't really um, connect to the value of it, then it's not for you. I think that it's starting to shine through that the folks that operate with those beliefs are the ones coming through this whole thing now. If you look at, for example, Dragonfly Earth Medicine, who's absolute legends in outdoor grow, and rosin in BC. They're very well known like around the world. You can tell that those types of personalities are coming out. But to your point, I think it's a business. Like at
Mm.
the end of the day, we've built this into a business that requires all parties to be competent. So familiarizing yourself with the cycle of the plant, familiarizing yourself with the industry, familiarizing yourself with the kind of overarching process of growing and consuming cannabis is important. But that's just the application to the skills that you have,
Mm.
and that can be any skill that a business needs, like I said. So
Absolutely. No, that's very well put. Yeah, fantastic. And you obviously from where you are geographically, I was going to say you probably have a plethora of people. There are probably plenty of people who know about cannabis and have a personal relationship with it, but
right.
don't necessarily have those ancillary skills. And therefore, you probably have similar frustrating conversations, I'd imagine, where you appreciate someone's love for the plant, but it's not something that that they can particularly utilize to move up into a job role or a career or something like that. Um, Unfortunately, of course, I just think there's almost too much passion for the plant. I think sometimes. Would you?
It's
It's an odd thing to say, isn't it? But do you know what I mean? There's
Yeah.
too much love
Just
to
because you
go
love it
around.
doesn't mean you should do it. And let me
Yeah,
tell you, it is not for the faint heart. Like, it
yeah,
is a crop. We are in a farming industry. This is a farmable plant. It's not a CPG good. Not until it's in its final format. So as a cultivator, you have the highest risk every time you plant a room. You know what I mean? So it's not for the faint-hearted. I would say that. And so, there's roles within that you don't have to be as dire as, the person bringing in and dispensing the money, or growing the plants. But, I think you've got to love it. You've got to believe in it. You don't need to love consuming it, but you need to apply real life skills, because this is now, I don't say this lightly, but it's a real life industry. In Canada, we saw a ton of people get into this industry and get put in positions to run companies that were highly unqualified. And I have no problem saying that, because I saw a lot in my public cannabis days, and of course some fantastic people as well. And people that came from a completely different industry to run this industry had the same issues as people that came from the industry to run this legal industry as well. So you really have to meet in the middle, and you have to be malleable, and you have to be ready to learn. And so it's really more about that like constant evolution, I think, and having those qualities as an employee, or as a manager, or a C-suite person, and diving into where this is actually going, because where you came from and where this is going, none of us know.
Yeah,
None of
true.
us know.
It's a question I reflect on myself, but I'd love to hear from your point of view. I mean, when you started in this, if you could go back and talk to yourself at the point where you started, like, was you say 8 or 9 years ago?
Yeah.
Would you believe that what you're doing now in terms of producing the way you're producing and distributing to countries across the world and everything
Yeah.
that you're
I
doing
guess,
and have done?
yeah. I guess 10 years ago now. I'm losing track of time, but anyway,
Yeah, it is.
yeah, I think I still wake up every day, Alex, wondering what the heck's going to happen tomorrow. So I'm still in that stage. So went from growing in warehouses and um, kind of having to hide who I was and what I was doing, to being part of an amazing team that's building a brand, and we're focused on medical now, to try and heal and build happiness in people, and peace, and states of calm, and all these types of things. So I don't think I could have guessed where it went. And I still don't feel like I have a handle on it. Every day you wake up wondering what you guys are going to do, in the UK, or what Germany is going to do, or you know so we're really still just in this development stage. The US obviously is a huge conversation right now, but at the end of the day, you just hope the power of the plant prevails and it keeps going.
Yeah, that's what I tell myself, because you're right. It's a roller coaster ride. You just have to hold on
Yeah.
and hope that you come off it still standing. And but I reassure myself, because of, like I said earlier, I suppose all that love for the plant. There's so much power in what it can do for people, but also I think the relationship people have with it, that it feels a bit Pandora box, in the sense that, I think we've had so much movement in terms of legalization, in terms of progress, in terms of changing attitudes in the last 10, 15, 20 years. I just can't see that going backwards. And I
No.
think, that'll be reassuring for everyone watching, I suppose, that
Yeah.
yeah, we have
Yeah, I
I
guess
just want to
my
hear that.
head goes more in the technicalities of it all, but she's here to
Yeah,
stay. We know this. She's been here to
yeah,
stay, for thousands of years, and she prevailed through 100 years of prohibition, in our Western world anyway, and beyond. So I'm very grateful for that, and it's nice to feel like we can plant our roots, knowing that that isn't going anywhere. And luckily, we have people like you who are speaking their story, so heavily and so true, and are taking the reins in sharing that knowledge and that education, because that's probably the most important part at this point, right? We're in this kind of, peak from a hard valley that, now the right people need to be at the hull of it to build it to the best of its abilities that we can do to help people, and create a product that sustains and nourishes, versus, because at the same time it's a crutch for people. It's a coping mechanism for people. It's all about how you see it. So if we can spread happiness and light and positivity and understanding, then we maybe just kind of push people more to that side of healing, right?
yeah, that's it. And I get that speaks to what you were talking about earlier in terms of intention as well. Yeah, it's fascinating, isn't it? Because I think a lot of people in the UK that don't have the same conversation over and over again with someone who doesn't know it's legal yet. And I'm the one telling them it's legal. You can get a prescription. what are your diagnosis? Why do you use cannabis? And I can say whether or not they're likely to be eligible for a prescription or not, and whether it's worth them contacting the clinics here and going down that
Right.
path. And whether they have a diagnosis or not, whether they have sort of the right things on their medical history, which will enable them to go down that path. It When you start to dig into why they use cannabis, it's so rare to me that it is something that's not somewhat connected to their health in terms of them being able to relax, them being able to switch off anxiety, overthinking. Often it'll be say, I need it to wind down or else I won't sleep. And I have to kind of reiterate the idea that sleep is one of the most crucial parts of being healthy and healthcare. And there's all sorts of medicines that exist to promote sleep and better sleep and to help sedate people and relax people in all sorts of different ways. So I think when people are using something illegally, the presumption isn't that the intention is medical, even when it is. And that it
Totally.
blows my mind. It blows my mind. But no, I mean it's so good to hear about what Cake and Caviar are doing, and get that insight from a company that is small scale but is doing these big things. And I just in such a fascinating way. I love I'm hopeful that we'll get a nice clip of the salmon and the cannabis plants growing, and we can show exactly what this looks like. And I'll slot that into the episode here so people can see as you're
Perfect.
describing it. But no, thank you so much for sparing the time with us today and telling us all about what you get up to. If I can, I'll end on one of the cheesiest questions I have, which is if you. In fact, let's do two. I'll start with, if you don't mind, what would you want this to look like in terms of medical cannabis, in terms of Habitat and Cake and Caviar 5 years from now? Where do you hope to be with the company?
I hope that we are a staple or a consistent presence in the lives of people who need or want us. I think that's really what it is. So, as far wide as we can stretch as possible, whether that's through our small micro, which is the more aquaponics side of things, or even just BC craft growers with our genetic locker, for those consistent genetics. I want to see us in as many countries will have us, and, be a consistent, provider in their life, I think.
Fantastic. And the last one, what would you want people to take away from this conversation? What is the number one thing you want people to know about Habitat?
Know your grower. I think it's super important to know your grower. Like I said, we don't take it lightly that we're in an industry that is seen in many different lights. And I think, if you want to go far, or how I believe we're going to go far, it's by connecting with people, just the same as how cannabis connects with people. So knowing your grower, I think, is extremely important. And there's a lot to sift through right now as things are growing and bubbling, and so appreciate the ones that are getting out there and putting their heart and soul into things, because those are the ones you want to support.
Yeah, well put, well put. And funny that you mentioned that, because it's something that I've had a few conversations about this week, where brands are on the market here in the UK under a certain brand, but actually the grower is a different company, or the breeder might have been a different company as well. So I'm going to do what I can, working for a distributor, try and make sure that all of that information is super clear, so that the doctors and the physicians and those that need to know it can access that. But yeah, couldn't agree more that we as patients should be looking into the companies that are actually growing it, who is actually behind this medicine, not just the brand that's on the label, but actually
Yeah.
inquire and say, well, who grew this? Where did it come from? Um, you know, and ask about the more, the details around it. Is it irradiated? Does it have, what terpene percentage does it have? All these different things. So I think there's a responsibility for us, and I'm talking about Grow here, that our company to make sure we're providing as much information as we can that's relative and crucial. And but I also think patients need to demand that information as well, and go out and find it and do their own research, look into these companies, and I hope they'll look into Cake and Caviar and Habitat, and I'm sure if they do, they'll be very impressed with what they find. And yeah, well, remains to be seen the response to the product once it lands in the UK, but I am certainly very excited. And yeah,
Me
thank you so
too.
much for joining us on this podcast and sharing with us, Kayla. Thank you so much.
Thanks so much, Alex. Yeah, it's great to chat with you. I'm very grateful.
Great. Thanks so much. All right, guys. And thank you, everybody, for watching. And we'll be back with another episode of Grow Conversations very, very shortly. Make sure you subscribe if you haven't already. And we'll see you very soon. Bye now.